Do any of you have trouble misplacing things that you then have to play seek and find at home? What kind of things do you misplace? Everything. Well, there we go. Matter. We misplaced all the matter. What else? Keys, phone. And so then we go on these glasses. Yep, I forget mine all the time because they're new for me. Then we have to go on these seeking expeditions to find things. And depending on how that goes, we can cycle through some things, right? I remember a day that I needed to leave the church here to go to a meeting. And I can't go anywhere without my phone because it's my phone, it's my calendar, it's my map if I need one, and all the rest of that. And so it wasn't in my office. But now I'm starting to get to that point of anxious because I'm going to be late if I don't get out of here soon. And last night I spent 10 minutes looking for my water bottle. I found it eventually. I knew it was in the building, right? So I was looking for my phone, and guess where it was? No, I was talking on it. So I'm looking, I'm going to be late, I'm getting anxious, and then I hit that moment of realization, right? So in my seeking, I took this journey from, I have time to find it, to anxiousness that I'm going to be late, to, oh my gosh, it's been right here the whole time. Today, we encounter the women coming to the tomb on Easter, seeking the body of Jesus. And we see them take a very quick journey through a whole set of emotions. They have come to remember, right, and care for the dead in the way that they did. But then they get to the tomb and it's empty. So right away, they probably have some shock. And their text tells us they were perplexed. Probably their grief got amplified a little bit. But then there's these two guys in dazzling white. I don't know what you do with that emotionally, other than just shock. And then they say, why are you looking for the living amongst the dead? He is risen. That's probably just as perplexing. And then they say, remember, he told you that was going to happen. And then they have to go, oh, wait, yeah, he did tell us that. But what does that even mean, right? And that all happens in this little bit of seeking that they have to go through this huge range of emotions. I've been reading a book called Hope Within History by an Old Testament scholar named Walter Brueggemann, who everything he writes is brilliant. He's in his 80s now, and he's kind of this grizzled guy, and when he preaches, you listen because it's amazing. And in this book, he talks about how faith formation works for the people of Israel. And he says that in modern times, we think of faith formation as stages, right? We talk about children's developmental stages. We talk about stages of faith formation. We're going to have a baptism at 11, and the little one's going to get a story Bible. Like, that's a good first step. Then we continue to send the family these materials we call Splash that they get for a couple of years as part of that developmental process. And then we'll have communion instruction, and then we'll have First Bibles, and eventually we'll have confirmation. And then hopefully they keep showing up. And then we have high school things, Bible study as adults. And we talk about these as stages. But Brueggemann says he doesn't think that's how it works. Despite all of the, whole educational industry we have built around these kind of things, he thinks it actually is about movement. And he looks at the people of Israel and said that movement is not for individuals, it's for the whole. And he uses the story of Exodus to talk about this and says there's three movements that he sees. The first one is that they bring a critique to the way things are. So for the people of Israel, they're like, wait a minute, we're slaves, and the Egyptians are oppressing us. That's not good. And then they say out loud, right, this isn't good. We don't want this anymore. So first comes the critique. The second thing he says that happens is that they give voice to their pain. And in Exodus, it says they cried out, right, from their pain. The third thing that happens then is the movement to something new, and that requires imagination because you have to break with the way things are after you've given voice to your pain to find something new. He also sees this in the prophets as a pattern that gets repeated. The prophets come and they say, hey, things aren't great right now the way this is going, so let's give voice to how we feel about that, and then, by the way, God's going to do something new. I think this is what happened at the tomb that morning. If you think about it, I don't think we always think about this. Jesus gets hung on the cross. All of the people that followed him, that were in the parade on Palm Sunday, had to think, well, this is risky. being associated with him. That's why Peter denied him, right? He knew it was risky. The women did not run away. When you listen to the Good Friday story, they stayed nearby, right? They did not abandon Jesus. They were close by. And then on the next, right, when it's time, they come to the tomb. This still sounds to me like a risky thing. If the empire has just executed somebody, and you were one of his followers, and you show up at the tomb, you're continuing to say, yep, I'm following him still. So the women coming to the tomb, this is not simply a showing up and doing the rituals of death like it sounds like. I think it's also a continued commitment that the empire might take notice of. So they're critiquing the way things are. Now, Luke, as Luke tells the story, also critiques the way things are, because when they come back and tell all the rest of the male disciples what happened, they go, no, that didn't happen, which tells us that women didn't get listened to already, and that's still a critique we can have today of the way things are. So in this gospel account, we have a critique of the way things are. Then the next step is that expression of pain. We don't get to see that whole bit of it, but you can bet that their grief was already there, and when the story tells us they had perplexity, it's that grief was getting multiplied as they weren't able to now find Jesus where they were seeking him. So there's the critique of what is, there's the expression of pain, and then the third bit is the new thing. So the two dazzling figures say, hey, why are you looking for the living amongst the dead? He is risen. And when they say, do you remember? They go, oh, we do remember. They don't still know what it means, but now a new possibility has been opened up. And that new possibility means new things in all of their lives. And this is where Brigham would say that these movements aren't just about intellectual understanding, that they are transformational in the lives of people. For the people of Israel, it was being liberated from slavery and journeying through the wilderness and coming to a new understanding of who they were. For those women at the tomb, it was being liberated from the way things were, but also from the things of death, so that they could come to this new understanding of life. When we gather in this place in worship, I've been thinking a lot about this recently. For however many of us there are today here, I would bet that there are that many things that we are seeking when we come to worship. And I tried to make a list of them, which I'm sure is some but not all, right? Like sometimes we may become seeking comfort. The things of the world around us have been hard and we need just some space to breathe. Sometimes I would bet we come seeking understanding. We're trying to figure out life, and maybe there's something of answers in what we hear in this place. Sometimes I think we come seeking meaning and purpose, whatever that means. Sometimes we probably just come because that's what we do. Sometimes we probably don't even know if we are seeking or couldn't even articulate it. And probably in each of our lives, why and when we come seeking shifts and changes with the things that are going on. And just like those women, we are on these journeys where there are the things that are, there are the pains in our world, and there might just be new possibilities. On Good Friday, as we gathered in this space, we had some stations set up ahead of worship, and there were sets of cards that you could privately write things on that then got stacked up, and we read them during worship. One of the cards said, I fear, and you could fill in the blank. The one next to it said, I am hopeful for. Then there were two, one that said, I need to forgive, and there was, or help me to forgive, and then there was the blank you fill in, and the other one said, please forgive me for. Then there was another that said, help me to reconcile, and then another that just said, I pray for. The most frequently heard thing I've heard in the last 2 days is how shocking it was to hear the raw pain of people lifted up in their own voice for the people that just happened to be gathered in this space that day. Some of the fears were sort of external things like violence in the world, but a lot of it was just internal stuff, like I fear that I'm not enough. Help me reconcile with myself or with my family. This was deep and painful stuff. It fits that middle bit where we give voice to our pain. There's that first bit, though, of the critique of what is. And a lot of those prayers and a lot of that pain was also a critique of what is. In many ways, when we gather as church, we are critiquing the culture around us. When we confess, we don't do confession on Easter. We just say he is risen. But when we confess, right, is that a common thing out in our culture? To just stand up and admit your brokenness and tell everybody about it and seek forgiveness? No, right? That's a countercultural sort of thing. When we gather around this table, who's invited to it? Is that how our culture works? Nope, right? Again, critique. Everything we do when we gather in this place, so much of it runs against the way the world around us functions, right? And so when we gather, we are offering critique. In Holy Week, we have given deep voice to our pain, right? That's that second movement. The third bit then is the new imagination. And that's where Easter comes in, right? Because all of that stuff around us often seems overwhelming, and all of our seeking. This is the thing about our seeking. We come here seeking things. Everything that we seek here, there's an answer out there somewhere. I think of some guys I have known who retired, who were very much defined by their work. So when they retired, they no longer had meaning and purpose. And when they went searching for meaning and purpose, where did they know to look? Work. So they got another job. And then they worked more, and then they said, no, I want to retire. And then they retired, and then there went the meaning and purpose, right? And part of me wants in that journey for them for two dazzling figures to show up one day and go, psst, why are you looking for the living amongst the dead? That's not how this works. And so when you think about all of our searching, there's so many ways that we can find comfort and relationships or in our money or all the different things in our culture that will offer answers to whatever deep seeking we have. And almost all of them, probably all of them, ultimately, they may work for a while, but we'll get to a point where we're like, still seeking. And we may not even be able to articulate that. And that's where I wish, again, that we just had these two dazzling figures that would just show up and interrupt our day and say, psst, why are you looking for the living amongst the dead? He is risen, right? He is risen indeed. This is the newness, right? So we go from that movement of questioning what is to articulating our deep pain in a Good Friday kind of way, but then coming back again to that space of new life that we get in the resurrection. Probably 15 or 20 years ago now, a novel came out called The Shack. And in The Shack, the main character has an encounter with God's three persons. And there's a point in the book where the main character is talking to Jesus, and Jesus says something that the character interprets to mean, whatever you do, it leads to Jesus. And he more or less asks that and says, so whatever road I go down comes to you. And Jesus says, no, actually, most of the roads you go down go nowhere. But I will go down any road to find you. That, I think, is the story of Easter. All of our seeking ultimately ends at the cross, but Jesus comes and seeks us out. And that's that imagination, and that's that new life. And just like we did with the kids, it's a surprise. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to figure it, right? We could figure it out on ourselves. We wouldn't need God. And so the Easter story today is a surprise. It was a surprise to them. That new life is a surprise to us, and it shapes our faith and shapes us as people. That's why I started with that bit of faith formation. And so the encouragement for us as people of Easter is to continue to ask questions about the way things are, to work hard at being vulnerable together, to give voice to our pain, and to trust that God is the one that drags us to those new places. And we just might find, like I did that day when I was running frantically around here searching for my phone, that it was right there with me all along. Amen.